All right, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're stepping straight into the shadows of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. We're taking a dark, cinematic, investigative approach to peel back the tabloid's layers on history's most notorious occultist, Aleister Crowley, a man whose name literally still whispers through the corridors of modern pop culture, alternative spirituality, and historical scandal. So let's just tackle the elephant in the room right off the bat. Was Aleister Crowley truly the quote-unquote wickedest man in the world? The British press certainly branded him that way, painting him as this depraved mastermind of the dark arts. But as we comb through our source material, which ranges from academic journals to historical archives and even contemporary theology, we have to separate the historical reality from the sensationalized rumors. Was he actually a supernatural villain, or was something much, much more complex going on? Here is our investigative dossier for this explainer. We're going to hit 6 key areas: the myth of the beast, Victorian rebellion and occultism, Thelema and true will, psychology versus the supernatural, critics, controversy, and theology, and finally, his role as the architect of the counterculture. Let's get right into it. Section 1. The myth of the beast. We've got to start by looking at the terrifying public persona that Crowley so carefully built for himself. You know, what's genuinely fascinating here is how early the media actually caught on to his game. Take this 1915 quote from Vanity Fair, published right in the prime of his life. Even back then, astute observers realized the whole wickedest man thing was mostly theater, and that the terrifying legends were already overshadowing the actual human being. So what was his absolute greatest trick? Well, looking at our sources, historians and online communities pretty much agree. Crowley's true genius was basically being an early 20th century edgelord, provocateur. He literally manipulated the press to build his own infamy. By purposely styling himself as the Great Beast 666, he knew exactly how to use public hysteria as a massive, blazing spotlight for his own work. Moving on to Section 2, Victorian Rebellion and Occultism. Honestly, you just can't understand Crowley's darkness without looking at the blindingly strict light he was running away from. If we map out his life chronologically, it's a wild, rapid evolution. Born in 1875 to a wealthy, severely repressed Victorian family belonging to the Plymouth Brethren, a rigid sect basically waiting for the apocalypse. His own mother actually called him the Antichrist. But from that repressed childhood, he evolved into a key player in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn by 1898, and then founded an entirely new spiritual philosophy by 1904. But the sources show he was so much more than just a guy sitting in a dark room casting spells. He was incredibly complex. He co-led the first British mountaineering expedition to K2. He published scandalous poetry. He lived openly as bisexual during an era in Victorian England where that was strictly criminalized. And, get this, records even suggest he may have operated as a double agent for British intelligence during World War I. Okay, Section 3, Thelema and true will. Let's actually analyze the religion and the philosophy that he created. Now, here's a crucial point. Despite what the tabloid screamed, Thelema was definitely not just some excuse to party. The absolute core of his teaching was this concept of true will. It's actually a super rigorous call to strip away all your superficial, ego-driven desires and societal expectations to discover what you are fundamentally put on this earth to do. It's about aligning your individual purpose with the cosmic order. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. These famous axioms from his 1904 text, the Book of the Law, are the absolute ethical bedrock of Thelema. Crowley claimed an entity named Aiwass dictated this to him over 3 days in Cairo. And while do what thou wilt sounds like a license for total chaos, within the framework of true will, it's actually a strict command to figure out your exact universal purpose and do nothing but that. And here is an absolutely mind-blowing historical coincidence from the source material. While in Cairo, Crowley was deeply inspired by an ancient Egyptian artifact called the Stele of Revealing. Want to guess its museum catalog number? Exactly 666. Yeah, the very same number his ultra-religious mother cursed him with as a kid. For Crowley, that was the ultimate confirmation of his dark destiny. Section 4, Psychology versus the Supernatural. As science started rapidly advancing in the early 20th century, occultists really had to struggle to explain their rituals. This led to a massive ideological split. As Freud and Jung were making psychology mainstream, Crowley's peer, MacGregor Mathers, started arguing that angels and demons were actually just manifestations of the human unconscious, the higher self. But Crowley completely rejected that psychological reduction. He insisted that entities like Aiwass and his holy guardian angel were literal, separate, autonomous beings. Because think about it, if they were just in his head, his religion of Thelema couldn't claim universal cosmic authority, right? Yet, ironically, he still borrowed heavily from psychology. In 1909, Crowley went deep into the Algerian desert to perform these grueling, extreme rituals. The goal? The total obliteration of his ego, which he loosely equated with the Freudian concept of the I. He wanted to destroy his conscious self to cross a psychological abyss. It's a fascinating blend of archaic magic and modern psychoanalysis. Moving to Section 5, Critics, Controversy, and Theology. Since Crowley purposefully made himself the enemy of the establishment, we absolutely have to look at the pushback he got. If you break it down, your view of Crowley completely flips depending on the analytical lens you're using. To a historian, he's a fascinating byproduct of Victorian repression. To a psychologist, he's an early explorer of altered states and the subconscious. But to a theologian, he represents a highly dangerous rejection of divine law and traditional morality. To dive a bit deeper into that theological lens, our sources include a contemporary Urdu critique that looks at Crowley's work strictly through Islamic theology. From this viewpoint, his philosophy is critiqued as the ultimate rebellion against divine limits. By preaching "do what thou wilt," Thelema is interpreted as entirely rejecting God's authority, erasing the concepts of halal and haram, permissible and forbidden, and dangerously elevating the individual human will to the status of a deity. But rather than shy away from this religious outrage, Crowley leaned all the way in. He famously said, "The devil does not exist. The devil is, historically, the god of any people that one personally dislikes." He purposefully threw around terms like Satan and Lucifer, not necessarily because he worshipped a literal biblical devil, but because he knew exactly which buttons to push. It shocked the religious establishment and intentionally aligned him with rebels and outcasts. Finally, Section 6, Architect of the Counterculture. Let's look at the massive ripple effect Crowley had on the latter half of the 20th century.
The breadth of his cultural impact is honestly staggering. Whether you buy into his magic or just think he was a charlatan, his fingerprints are literally everywhere. I mean, he's on the cover of the Beatles' SGP album. Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin bought his old house. He deeply influenced aerospace engineering pioneers like Jack Parsons. And his texts are basically foundational DNA for modern Wicca and chaos magic. He gave artistic permission for whole generations to reinvent themselves.
Decades before the internet, before social media influencers or shock rockers were even a thing, Crowley proved that scandal, taboo, and the highly theatrical staging of the self could be the ultimate promotional strategy. He figured out early on that infamy is really just another form of immortality. Which leaves us with a lingering mystery to end this explainer. Was Aleister Crowley a genuine prophet who communicated with higher beings and unlocked hidden cosmic laws? Or was he simply a brilliant, flawed human being who became history's absolute greatest pioneer of edgy personal branding? I'll leave you to think on that, based on the evidence we've explored today. Thanks for joining me.